ARIF bin SOHALI.
Hi, my name is ROHIM bin Muhammad YUSUF.
Hi, my name is Farhan Hakimi bin FAIRUZ.
Hi, my name is AZRAIN bin SULAIDI.
These are the data used in our project. The first data is demand for 2-story terrace houses, and the second one is price of 2-story terrace houses. The third one is households annual income, and the last one is price of a condominium unit. This is the equation that represents the relationship, which consists of three variables, which are price of 2-story terrace houses, households income, and price of condominium per unit, where QD is equal to Y, which is quantity demand. Therefore, we will have three equations. Next, we are using Microsoft Excel to plot the graph and transfer the data into the graph. This graph will represent all the data that are available. This graph is price of 2-story terrace houses, households annual income, and price of a condominium per unit against demand for 2-story terrace houses. In slide 10, this graph represents the relationship between price of 2-story terrace houses and demand for 2-story terrace houses. As you can see, this graph has a positive relationship where Y is equal to 27.727 plus 221037.
This graph represents households' annual income against demand for 2-story terrace houses. As you can see, there is positive relationship between households' annual income and demand for 2-story terrace houses, where the equation is Y equals to 8.456x plus 40,697. Next, this graph represents price of a condominium unit against demand for 2-story terrace houses. As you can see, there is a negative relationship between price of a condominium unit and demand for 2-story terrace houses, where the equation is Y equals to negative 2.6723x plus 257,439. This is the regression output. For multiple R is 0.9822. For R square is 0.964756. For adjusted R square is 0.95972. For standard error, 335.079. Lastly, for observation, 25. This is the ANOVA table. As you can see, there are a total of 24 degrees of freedom. The total of sum square is 66,900,415.36, where the overall significance in regression analysis is 191.615. This is the multivariate linear regression that we have retrieved from Microsoft Excel.
From the demand equation below, the sign of the variable px is negative. That means if the price of 2-story terrace house increases by 1 ringgit, demand for 2-story terrace house will decrease by 0.0013. But as we can see from the graph, there is positive relationship between price of 2-story terrace houses against demand for 2-story terrace houses. Hence, the sign in the equation is not consistent with the trend line produced in question 3. From the demand equation below, the sign of the variable M is positive. That means if the household annual income increases by 1 ringgit, demand for 2-story terrace houses will increase by 0.1207. As we can see from the graph, there is positive relationship between households' annual income and demand for two-story terrace houses. Hence, the sign in the equation is consistent with the trend line produced in question 3. From the demand equation below, the sign of the variable PY is positive. That means, if the price of a condominium unit increases by 1 ringgit, demand for two-story terrace houses will increase by 0.0071. But, as we can see from the graph, there is a negative relationship between price of a condominium unit against demand for two-story terrace houses. Hence, the sign in the equation is not consistent with the trend line produced in question 3. To get the demand curve function, we substitute data from first row into M and Y, which resulted in Qx equal to 3608.05 minus 0.0013 px. Meanwhile, to get the inverse demand curve function, we equate the demand curve function with px, which resulted in px equal to 2775423.08 minus 769.23 qx. So, as we can see below, there are tabulated data for inverse demand curve function along with a curve of inverse demand. So, let's move on to interpretation of coefficient. Firstly, we have negative 0.0013 px, which means if px rise by 1 ringgit, qx will fall by negative 0.0013 units. Next, we have 0.1207 m, which means if m rise by 1 ringgit, qx will rise by 0.1207 units. And last but not least, we have 0.0071y, which means if y rise by 1 ringgit, qx will rise by 0.0071 units. Estimation of demand value qx. By substituting all the variables from the first row of data, we have the estimation of demand value qx equal to 3262.77.
As for price elasticity of demand, we first divert the demand equation in respect to price. We get the value of 0.0013 and we substitute the value into the price elasticity formula and we will get the value negative 0.106. We interpret this value by saying the demand is inelastic due to the value being less than 1. Then, for income elasticity of demand, we first divert the demand equation in respect to income. We get the value of 0.1207 and we substitute the value into the income elasticity formula and we will get the value 2.59. We interpret this value by saying it is a luxury good because the elasticity is more than 1. Lastly, for cross elasticity, we use the value 0.0071 which we got from our demand equation, which is the coefficient of the price of a condominium unit. We substitute the value into our cross elasticity formula. We will get the value 0.43. By this value, we can interpret by saying two-story house and condominium units are substitute goods. Each elasticity has its own purpose. For example, price elasticity helps the business proportion of income spent on the good. Cross elasticity helps the business to know the availability of a substitute goods. And then income elasticity helps the business by knowing whether the type of product is either a luxury good or a necessity good. Then, to forecast demand, we use our standard error value 335.08 that we got from our regression output. Then, we use our y-hat value by substituting the first row of our data into the y-hat equation, which give us 3262.77. By using these two formula, we substitute into the forecast demand formula and we will get a forecast range of demand of 2592.61 and 3,932.93. In conclusion, demand is within expected range.